Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, host Casey Hentges visits the Bowers Home Garden in Blanchard, Oklahoma. OSU Food Crop Specialist Lynn Brandenberger helps add organic matter and reduce weeds in the vegetable garden with fall cover crops. OSU Turfgrass Specialist Dennis Martin explains how regional test plots of tall fescue and Kentucky Bluegrass help provide valuable data for breeders and homeowners alike. And we get to meet a student who participated in a USDA Undergraduate Horticulture Research Summer Fellowship at Oklahoma State University.
Joining us today is Theresa Bowers, and we're here at her home residence to take a look at her garden. And Theresa, we're here by your shade garden. This is just beautiful.
Well, thank you.
I love how you've incorporated rock throughout your garden.
I've always been a rock person, and I don't know why, but so I have collected rocks just like everywhere our travels take us, you know. And because I had a drainage problem right here, because the way the concrete slopes
in towards your house a little bit.
So we dug down and then incorporated all my rocks from all my travels in here. And then I thought, well, since the big tree and everything, let's make it a shade garden.
Yeah, definitely.
So the hostas, and then I've got some little mouse ear hostas.
I love how you've lined the smaller hostas on the front side of that.
Right.
It's really cute.
Right, thank you. I tried to make the rocks look like it's kind of a white frothy look over there, and then it turns into blue. And then all this right here.
River rock.
My husband always says that. He says this looks like there was a flood in a pottery place.
Well, I love how you've incorporated the clay pots. I think we've all broken a few pots in our time, so why not just add them to the garden, right?
Right, and I've had those for years. And I also like driftwood. So that piece right there actually came from Colorado, and there's a big piece over there came from Colorado up in the mountains.
Well, and speaking of Colorado, I really like this design you've got over here.
Oh, well, thank you.
It kind of looks like that high desert, drought-tolerant garden. You've got a lot of really good drought-tolerant plants in here with the Arizona cypress.
And that was the plan.
The red yucca.
Of course, my rocks, I had to do the rock business.
Yeah.
And then I thought I'd incorporate the blue sedum in there, and it's all in bloom right now. They get yellow, of course. And then we've got the cypress, Arizona cypresses. And because I was trying to bring in blues.
Yeah, it definitely works. Yeah, you've got that kind of gray color going with the sedums and the Arizona cypress.
And then we got the black-eyed Susan. Actually, that just popped up by itself.
And it looks like the Mexican feathergrass will really start to fill in as it takes off. So.
Yes.
Very nice. And I bet this is a pretty low maintenance garden for you.
Actually, it really is. And that's what I like.
And it handles the heat right here by the driveway and everything.
And see, it gets the west sun, so it just really fits.
That's awesome. Well, let's go take a look in your backyard if you don't mind.
Sure.
This is just lovely back here. It's a little oasis for you, it seems.
This is my abelia bush. It's been here for,
And the abelias are such great plants. They're so steadfast, hardy for you.
Well, and the butterflies love them, and that's what I was trying to do in these gardens back here is bring the butterflies in.
And it's got a nice fragrance to it, too, as you walk past
I
it.
know.
So you've got a lot of pollinator plants. So I imagine with the liatris, the rudbeckia, the larkspur that you have here, you're seeing a lot of pollinators, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, actually, this plant here, it's actually the fennel.
Yeah.
It is the host plant for the swallowtails.
Right, right.
Well, my rocks.
Yeah. Speaking of rocks.
I worked out at Tinker, and my son-in-law worked out there for a while, and he told me, he said, Mom, you're not going to believe the rose rocks are out here. And they were actually going to sod over it because they were making a walking trail. So I'd go over there at lunchtime just for something to do and exercise, and I'd bring back a bag, wash them up.
Wow.
And I collected them. I'm going to say about 5 years
Yeah.
that it took me to do that.
That's a massive amount of rose rocks. I got to say, I love the bricks that you've used, different colors of bricks, and
We actually saved the bricks from when we built the house, so these are the same as the house bricks.
Oh, very nice.
And
And as
then-
we get closer to the pool, we've got a beach here, it looks like.
Exactly. Well, the funny thing is my husband's from Florida.
Okay.
And he actually wanted to move back there, and I was like, no, I can't. So when we go, we just pick up, so I've got this collection.
So this is
And
his tribute to Florida here.
That's what I was trying to do,
Very
you know.
nice.
And I got more over here, but then I was trying to make it like blue, like water. Mm-hmm. So I put the spiderwort in there.
Yeah, that's
And it blooms blue, so it's pretty.
with
And
the
then
Russian sage.
the
yeah.
Russian sage, so it's blue. And then I had a broken fish right there, so I just incorporated it
Looks
in
like
there.
he's jumping out of the water that way. And we're just a week early for all your lilies. It seems like your
Yes.
lilies are going to be coming on pretty soon, and your
Yes.
hibiscus. Well, you just have a lovely garden here, Theresa. Thank you so much for sharing
Well,
it with us.
thank you. I'm so glad you came out.
Well, this morning we're here at the OSU OKC campus. We're actually in the student garden, which is a part of the horticulture program here at OSU OKC. They've been nice enough to let us come and do some cover crop work here in the garden. This morning, before you got here, we had this ground tilled and loosened up so we'd have a nice seed bed to plant cover crops in. We actually planted 2 different cover crop mixes this morning. One was a mix commercial mix that had about 5 or 6 different species in it. A couple of those are legumes, like Austrian winter pea is a legume, and it had some grasses in it like oats and wheat, and had tillage radish in it. That was one mix, and then the other mix is kind of our homemade mix. It has winter wheat in it and crimson clover. Okay, so when we were getting this ground ready to plant to cover crops this morning, we were fortunate enough that OSU OKC had a really nice tiller. They had a man that ran it for us, so we really are thankful for that. But he tilled this all up, got the soil loosened up so we can have a nice seed bed to put those seeds into. Later on, we're going to talk a little bit about some summer cover crops, and we actually put those into a no-till area of this garden. And there we just used a rake and kind of roughed the soil up, put the seed down, and then rough the soil up again to get good seed to soil contact. So that's important for getting a stand. The other thing that we would like to do anytime that we're going to plant seed, we normally have some kind of recommended seeding rate that we use. In other words, how many seed would we put down per acre is normally how we think about it on a big field basis. So this morning what we did was we came out here and we measured the length and the width, and so our plots are 75 foot long by 6 feet wide. And we actually have 3 plots. One of these plots will be planted later, but the 2 plots that we planted were 6 feet wide by 75 foot. That gave us a certain number of square feet. We took that number, just length times width, we got a number, and then we divided that by the number of square feet in an acre, which is 43,560. Then we multiplied that times our seeding rate, and we wanted to put down about 100 pounds of seed per acre. And that worked out very nice, where we actually ended up with about 1 pound of seed that we needed to measure out. So after we figured that out, we went to our seed and we got our scale out and we actually weighed out that seed. We split it in 2. We did 2 half-pound batches, and that way both Linda and I could plant. And the other thing about splitting it into smaller increments is, like, if you do what I did this morning, which I put it out too heavy at first, and so I ran out of seed. Well, if I'd had all the seed and I ran out of seed, we would have been in trouble, but fortunately, Linda did the right rate, so we had enough seed to finish up. So that worked out pretty good. And that's just kind of one of those little tricks that we often kind of take care of. You know, whether you're spreading fertilizer or you're spreading seeds, break it down into 2 or 3 different amounts, and then, you know, if you're learning how to spread that seed, you can make some mistakes but still kind of recover from them. The last thing I want to talk about is actually the process that we use to plant this. Now, there are some nice push planters that we could have used, and that's a possibility. We could have used a dry fertilizer spreader, you know, a cyclone spreader, a little handheld. We could have done that. But we use what we call you might call it the hand method, I call it the chicken feed method. It's just like, you know, you're throwing seed out, and this is the way seed's been planted for millennia. Before we had all this fancy equipment, that's the way it was done. After putting the seed out as uniform as we could get it, then we took some rakes and raked the top of that soil and worked that seed down into the soil, because we need to get it where it's not just laying on top, because that seed needs a good connection with the soil so it can pick up moisture and then go ahead and germinate and grow. If we left it all on top, what would happen, the wind might blow it away, definitely birds would come and eat it, and so by covering it up, it helps protect the seed and then gets us this seed to soil contact that is so key. That's a key part of getting a stand. So when we talk about those different types of mixes, one of the things that we're looking for is some type of annual grass or cereal grass in the mix, because that adds a lot of organic matter to the soil. Our soils here in Oklahoma, because we're in the southern plains, a lot of times we're very low in organic matter. It's not much. It's pretty normal to see organic matter levels around 0.5 to 0.7% in our production soils. Where we'd like to be is 2 or 3% if we could get up that high, and that's going to take some doing to do that, but it can be done. Cover crops is one way to do that. So that's a great thing about cover crops, that help organic matter levels. The other thing, having those legumes in that mix, legumes can actually take nitrogen out of the soil air and fix it into the plant, and then later on when that cover crop is tilled into the soil, those get released, and it's like having free nitrogen for the crop that you're going to grow following the cover crop. So there's some great things that we can do with cover crops. One last thing about cover crops is that obviously they cover the ground, which is important. That protects the soil from water and wind erosion, which is a big problem, especially, you know, we get those 60, 70 mile an hour winds, or we get 3 or 4 inches of rain overnight. If we got cover crop on a field like that, we lose very little, if any, soil, because it's protected. The other thing that it does also is it shades the soil surface and prevents weedy species that we really don't want to have growing in our garden or in our field from growing. So we get a lot of benefits from cover crops. Okay, so we're standing out here in our cover crops that were sown this summer. Some of this cover crop that you see behind me and that I'm in was sown back in June. A lot of it was sown in July. So summer cover crops do similar things for us as winter cover crops. They protect the soil, they shade out weeds. If you have legumes in the mix, which we do, a lot of times they're fixing nitrogen that will be used by a crop later on. Add a lot of organic matter. So you see what's in front of me here is sorghum Sudan, which is an annual forage grass. And as most grasses go, adds a lot of organic matter to the soil, and that's part of the reason it's in this summer mix. You see Crotalaria out here in front of me and behind me. We actually have 7 different types of cover crop mixes on this little piece of ground here. Haldor Howard, who teaches horticulture here, planted these and got them up and growing, and they look great. And so we're excited to see how this is actually going to affect next spring's garden production, because these are actually permanent beds. They're not tilled. All this cover crop will be laid down and put on top of the beds, and then maybe possibly tarped to help it break down a little bit, and then they'll plant their spring gardens in these beds here. So it's an interesting concept. As I've said before, there are just a tremendous amount of advantages to using cover crops, either in your home garden or if you have a commercial operation. If you're interested in learning more about cover cropping and a lot of other aspects of soil health and fertility management, we have a really neat conference coming up in October. That will be October 9th and 10th. We'll actually be here in the Student Union at OSU Oklahoma City, and that conference is really targeting to talk about cover crops this year. So a lot of this stuff that you're seeing this morning in the garden here will actually be part of the little field tour that we'll have on the second day on the 10th. So if you're interested in coming to the Organic Oklahoma Conference this year, October 9th and 10th, be sure to pre-register. We actually have a website, and you can sign up there for the conference, and we're hoping to see you there. Take care. Thank you.
Hey y'all, my name is Skylar Baldwin. I'm from South Mississippi. I attend Mississippi State University, where I'm majoring in biochemistry and will begin my sophomore year in the fall. I'm here at Oklahoma State University with the Summer REU program, where my project is working with pecans across the state of Oklahoma. What we're looking for is nitrogen contents, carbohydrate contents, and we also measure the nuts and compare that with the heat units for that specific location so that we can correlate the two and decide, okay, if you've had this many heat unit days, this is about what you can expect from your pecans. What we're looking to do with that is include that in the Mesonet, which is Oklahoma State's resource for all across the state for different various information. What we're doing today is we're taking our pecans that we took today in Perkins, Oklahoma. We're cutting them open. We're deciding how big the ovule is, the expansion rate, and of course measuring. What we're doing with that, especially with the expansion rate, with pecans, once they reach about 50% expansion rate, you can start shaking your trees to get a nut drop. This increases their crop yield for the year, and it also protects next year's crops. What we do with that, or to do that, is we have a special tool here that is digital. We slide it, we measure the pecan very easily, just like this. You do it, we input the data into our laptops. That goes into everything we've done this summer. Then we cut them open, we take pictures, we also weigh them and do a displacement test. And with our nitrogen and carbohydrate, what we're hoping to do, unfortunately in the state of Oklahoma, there's been about a 3 million pound drop over the past couple years, and we're trying to figure out why that is. We test nitrogen in the leaves to determine if there has been a drop from this year to next year, because this is a 3-year project. And then with carbohydrates, we take a current season, a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old sample, and we measure the carbohydrates from each thing. And that way we can see, okay, this year it had X amount of carbohydrates, but this year it only had X amount. That way we can really set up our future of the project. We know what's going on in our plants, and we can help our producers not only increase their crop yield, but potentially grow better trees. Being from Mississippi, going all the way out here to Oklahoma has been a big change in my life, but the people here at Oklahoma State and with the REU program have made that transition very easy for me. I have loved every minute of being here. Working with Miss Becky and Dr. Lou Zhang, they have made this experience the best I possibly could have even dreamed about. I highly recommend it for anyone, and I'm so thankful that I was chosen to be a part of this opportunity.
Tall fescue is an important turf grass for use in light to medium shaded areas in Oklahoma. We plant this grass principally in the fall because we'll have about 8 months of good growing conditions for it to mature before it goes through its first tough summer. You can do spring seedings, but fall are going to be much more successful. When we pick tall fescues or cool season grasses, which they are an example of, we want to pick top performers. The National Turf Evaluation Program, or NTEP, is a national trialing system that allows a number of private industry as well as university breeders to test their materials nationally to find out what works best. While individual citizens may not have purchasing power to pick the best of the varieties, the marketing that goes on does generally put the best varieties in the marketplace on the shelves for consumers to pick. Now let's see an example of why we run these trials. To my left here, we see an example of tall fescue that's been struck by summer diseases. This would be a bad selection to work with. Hopefully the data sets will allow this one to be completely ruled out and we won't see it come out in the marketplace. But as you look around the trials, you can see a number of varieties that are surviving quite well. We've had heat indices in the low 100s, temperatures in the upper 90s, and it's quite probable that we'll have some actual air temperatures above 100 degrees. When you pick cool season grasses for use in a light or medium shade, what we suggest in Oklahoma is to use a tall fescue at 90 to 95% by weight in the mix with a Kentucky bluegrass at 5 to 10% by weight. Examples of that mix include the long-term commercialized mix Heartland Supreme, and there's also a number of other types on the shelf. Now that again will be a small amount of Kentucky bluegrass mixed with a turf type tall fescue. Mixing those two species gives us cross resistance to diseases, so that's the concept. And then with the tall fescues, we're looking to use 2 or 3 different varieties within the tall fescue species in that mix. As indicated earlier, Oklahoma State University suggests a mix of turf-type tall fescue and turf-type Kentucky bluegrass to get cross-resistance against multiple diseases. Here we're at the 2017 through 2021 NTEP Kentucky bluegrass trial. Again, the bluegrasses should be mixed at about 5 to 10% by weight. There are actually 10 times more bluegrass seed per pound than tall fescue per pound. It's a very small seed, and that's why we use much smaller amount of it in the mix than what you might expect. Now, many people move to Oklahoma from the northern or upper Midwest, and they're used to 100% Kentucky bluegrass lawns. The reason we don't recommend 100% Kentucky bluegrass lawns in Oklahoma, even in the light or medium shade, is if you happen to have a poor performing variety, you can come down with summer patch disease. As you look around the trial here, you can see a number of varieties that have the disease. Here's one to my right, and you'll notice these are approximately 5 by 5 foot research plots, and you see the disease occurring within that area. Some varieties are relatively unaffected, and then a variety right next to it will have a severe case of the disease. So here in Oklahoma, we'll suggest the mix of tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass in order to try to overcome diseases like summer patch.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, Casey will have a tough group of Oklahoma-proven plants. We'll meet another undergraduate researcher at OSU, and we'll begin an exciting adventure of Oklahoma gardening in Italy, where we'll explore slow food, agritourism, and horticulture in the stomach of Europe. We hope you join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. Ciao! To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and the Tulsa Garden Club.